Okay, last year we took a trip to Italy, and we're still in Italy. It's the closest I'll be able to get there, because a number of years ago I got a speeding ticket, never paid, and now it's about 10 million euros. So the closest we'll get is to talk about Italy. The last individual was the great Rabbi Aryeh of Fano, who's buried in Mantova. A little younger than him was another incredible personality, and he's the person we're going to talk about tonight. During his time in his life, he was famous. He was a legend in his lifetime and in the following generations. Recently, however, the Fruma world has turned against him, and most refer to him as a heretic, or if not as sharp, then pretty sharp. He's been cast out of mainstream Judaism, and it's very sad. And we are here to defend him, because the Yehudah defends him. Oh. And well, in fact, people, no, there are many who grew up in a Haredi society, an ultra-Orthodox society, a very enclosed upbringing, and anyone that's a little bit out of their lane, there's very little tolerance for. And the word kafir and heretic is thrown around very loosely, and they'll refer to, I've been referred to as that. It's just everywhere. Anyone that's just not in their lane, a kafir. You know, it's like when you drive, anyone that drives faster than me is a danger to society. And anyone who drives slower is a nuisance to society, right? So anyone who's frumer than me is extreme. Anyone that's not as frum is careless, doesn't take things seriously. And that's something that many of us can relate to. But 400, 500 years ago in Italy, in the times of the Renaissance, things were a little different. And it's very easy to look back today and judge based on today's standards of life, that how could that rabbi have done that? How could that individual be engrossed in those activities? But we got to understand that at the time it could have been normal, it could have been justified, and you can't judge the past based on the knowledge of the present.
Rabbis didn't have beards.
Exactly. We had that whole discussion about the rabbis in Italy not having beards. The Chassam Sofer says all the rabbis in Italy didn't have, and looking back today we can't relate. But if that was the norm, and we discussed it in the last year, but in theory if that was the norm, then that was the norm. Reb Moshe Feinstein, in fact, has a letter that I didn't quote in the shir about the beards, but Reb Moshe Feinstein goes so far as to say that not touching the beard is only based on kaballah, not based on halacha, and not just that, he thinks the Arizal created it. He thinks 700, 800 years ago, even people involved in kaballah took off their beards. That's how far he goes. He thinks the Arizal created the idea, and he says, proof is even the Arizal's own students weren't careful based on the Be'er Asik we saw last week. And he builds a whole halachic tshuva based on that. And it's surprising, it's bizarre, it's a little alarming with all due respect to the Moshe Feinstein. But we saw that Rabbi Yosef Irgaz completely demolished that lead of the Be'er Asik, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was unaware of that. And he bases a halach, whatever it is, fine. The character we're going to talk about today, his name was Yehudah, Reb Yehudah. Reb Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. Modena is a territorial area in Italy. He wasn't himself born or lived in Modena, but that's where his family was from. They came from France generations before, settled ultimately in Modena, and became extremely wealthy. A famous family, and they even took on the name the Modena family. He ultimately was born in Venice in the year 1571. He's born in Venice in 1571. And he writes in a few places that his moil was none other than the Rameh Mifanu. Rabbi Nachum Azaria Fanu, who was only 23 years old at the time, was world famous enough that he was invited to be the moil. And when Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh writes about it, you can see the pride in his words. He was very proud throughout his life of the fact that his moil was the Rameh Mifanu. He was very proud of that. He grows, he was a wonder child. That's how everyone describes him. He was a prodigy. He was a prodigy in all areas. And he wrote many Sfarim. One of them is an autobiography called Chaye Yehudah. It's available, and I have many excerpts of it on the page. It's 60 pages or so. One of the most interesting reads that you can come across. And in it, he writes so many personal details. And the truth is, on the one hand, we don't really want to get too personal with big tzaddikim from the past. There's an idea called al tigu b'mshichai, don't touch my anointed ones, which means that you don't probe, analyze the personal heart and mind of a tzaddik. It's not our domain. Nonetheless, in this instance, he wrote a whole book discussing his personal story. So, he wanted it to be publicized. He writes in his introduction, I want this for my family and my students to know what I went through and that it can inspire them. Most of it is very sad and bitter. It's not very inspiring, and it's a very sad book, but it's real. And so on the one hand, he's supplying, we're not probing, he's supplying it to us. And on the other hand, in this case, I said that in the previous generation and today, many Charedim have turned their back on this particular gadol and have written very sharp descriptions and words against his gadol. And I think Dafka, by looking at his personal life and by seeing what went on inside, it'll actually come to save him in the end. It'll be for his own benefit that we're aware of these personal and intricate details. So I begin with number one, just to get a bit of a taste. We're going to quote from a number of his Sfarim, but we begin with his autobiography, Chaye Yehudah. First, he wants to tell you where he comes from, and he throws into some whopping stories. You think living in Italy in the 1500s, the time of the Renaissance, life was peaceful, there was wealth and there was no oppression. That's not the case at all. The Yidden in Venice lived in a ghetto. There were a couple ghettos in Venice in the 1500s. And Bechlal over Italy, the Yidden suffered, maybe not as much in other places of the world, but there was always trials and tribulations. Join me in number one. Number one. He's talking about his grandfather named Mordechai. He says, Ki hapered the mule asher hoya roichav alav. He says this grandfather of Mordechai of Modena, was his father's father. He says his Zayda was one of the greatest scholars of the generation. He wrote a book just like the Beis Yosef, going through all areas of halacha and explaining and elucidating all the various opinions. But he says his Zayda died Nebuch before he managed to complete the job. What happened to his Zayda? He says, what is his name? Mordechai of Modena. You see, we don't even know about him. Ki hapered asher hoya roichav alav. He was riding on a mule, some animal. Boat baragloi kicked him, and he had a wound. The doctors of the city in Italy, mikinosim, they were so jealous of him. Nosnu shoichad. They paid a bribe to the professional doctor who was healing him, and he put poison in the cast. But Tachboishas is the cast. V'misa, and he killed him. They killed him. The Goyim killed him. Who writes on a parrot, on a mule? You know what? That's a kasha for my son. Question. I'm not here to answer that. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, good. Ubeyoy Moisai. On the day that my Zayda was dying, Kara La'adoni Avizal, he called my father. This is Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh recording. His father's name was Yitzchak. His Zayda's name was Mordechai. My Zayda called my father, who was a kid. Va'amala, he told my father, Psoik li psukecha, tell me your pasuk. You find in Gemara very often people would, you wanted to have a good simon, to see a good omen, you would ask a kid, what are you learning? What pasuk are you learning? And he told him, Beis Yaakov l'chuva nelcha, go in the light of God. So the Mordechai understood that he's passing away. Oz Amr, he said, Imken oibazait sarach lalechaz, apparently I'm leaving. The take of Korah, and right away he called his people, he made his will, and Itaka passed away. So that's how Yehudah passed away. And he left his father, Rabbi Yitzchak was young. And Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh grew up, and you'll see why this is significant, with a tremendous, awesome respect for his Zayda Reb Mordechai, who he never knew. Look at number 2. This happened to an uncle of his in Italy. Not that we have. The Goy Echad Rimohu. Yehudah Aryeh had an uncle. One of his father's brothers was an expert alchemist. He was an alchemist. This is in Italy in the Renaissance. Alchemy was big. It was very big. And one of the Goyim, they fooled him. Ki heroloi taisefes meruba. Or meruma. The guy showed him that, listen, I can enhance the amount of gold you have. He seduced Yehudah Aryeh's uncle to take all the silver and gold that he had in the store and to bring it to a certain courtyard. And the guy said, we're going to melt it down, and when it congeals, it's going to be double, for kiflei kiflayim, it's going to be 4 times. So, so Yehudah Aryeh's uncle, he goes with the guy, bad idea. The Shom tokacherev bebitno, the guy plunged a sword into the stomach of the Yid, Vahargoy, and killed him, and the guy took all the silver and gold and he left. And this was the night of Bir Chometz, the night before Pesach. But hold on, the story, the next day, Higishu Bedover, people realized that, hey, where's this Yid? I think his name was Shmaya. His name was Reb Shmaya. Where's Reb Shmaya? Vayimsu, they found his dead body. Vayikburu, they buried him. That means the Yidden buried him. And it sounds like the Yidden wanted vengeance. 3 days later, the murderer was found with all the silver and gold, without anything missing, and they sliced the guy into 4 parts. This is your mafia shtick. This is mafia shtick happening in Italy in the 1500s. What?
There's even Jews or Italians too.
So this is... Italy wasn't so fine and dandy. There were tsaras, you see, his Zayda, his uncle, both murdered by Goyim, who were jealous of their success or their money.
But it was more like the Wild West. It wasn't like the government.
Correct. Although the Pope did make certain xeris, burning Sfarim. The ghetto was from the government, yeah. Yeah, there was a big burning in the middle of the 1500s, big burning of Sfarim, yeah. Okay, number 3. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh describes, he was born in Venice, we mentioned 1571. Ben shtei shonim umechs, at 2.5 years old, I said Haftarah in the shul. Go figure. There's an idea, cotton, a kid can say Haftarah. 2.5 years old. He's not even option. 2.5 years old, he said the Haftarah in the shul. When he was 3 years old, I recognized God, like it says about Avraham Avinu. And I recognized the worth of learning and Chochmah, and I was explaining the Parish and the Chumash and Umevin. I was able to understand properly at the age of 3. Okay, so he was a prodigy. He was a prodigy. And he details many teachers that he had. His family kept on moving between, there was Venice, there was Ferrara, and Bologna and some other places over there. And he had many teachers. Most of the names we're not even familiar with today. But many people taught him. And he learned not only Torah, he learned language, he knew Latin, he knew other languages. He learned grammar, poetry. He was a master poet. And later in life he's going to write poetry for Parnassa, like the Ibn Ezra. By the way, historically, any Yid, all the Yidden that wrote poetry for a living were never that successful financially. The poetry was great, but it didn't bring in, like the Ibn Ezra wrote in a poem, that if I would sell candles, the sun would never set. If I would make shrouds, no one would ever die, right? Everything he did was without success, and His poetry was nice, but also doesn't bring in that much. Maybe there were many poets.
Like your Shiva teacher.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Hollywood. It wasn't Hollywood.
But you know what? Just like they were happy, we're happy. What?
It wasn't Hollywood.
Yeah. So now what's interesting is you would think he didn't live too far from Reb Menachem Azaria. Reb Menachem Azaria is living in Mantova. He's living in Venice and Ferrara. It's all in North Italy. It's all pretty close to each other. But we don't know any stories of interaction between the two. In Venice, there was a great scholar by the name of Schick. You know anyone with the last name Schick? So many Yidden took the last name Schick because Schick stands for Shem Yisrael Kodesh. Shem Yisrael Kodesh. Many took the last name Schick. But the original Schick stood for Shmuel Yehudah Katzenellenbogen. The son of the great rabbi, the Maharam of Padua. The Maharam of Padua, Rabbi Meir Katzenellenbogen, was one of the greatest scholars in the entire world in the 1500s. And his son was Shmuel Yehudah Katzenellenbogen. It's a long name, so they just called him Schick. They didn't do Kazan or this or that. They just said Schick. What?
Related to the Jewish king of one name?
Sholvol.
Yeah.
Sure,
Really?
sure, yeah. And Schick was a big Rav in Venice, and Yehudah Aryeh was influenced by him amongst many other teachers. This Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh grows up, and at the age of 13, he put out his first sefer. And the first sefer he put out was about gambling. Okay? The first sefer he put out was in Hebrew. He was 13 years old, he tells us himself. It was called Sur Meira, Stay Away from Evil. What it is a dialogue between two people. One guy's name is Eldad, one guy's name is Meidad. They were both good friends growing up, and Meidad, they got married. Unfortunately, Meidad, while his father-in-law took him to business, he met some friends that were no good, and they led him off the beaten track, steeped into gambling. Everything was gambling, cards, dice. This is Italy. Italy, the end of the 1500s. This is, and Venice, right? The home of the casinos. And this Eldad, look at number 5, actually. Join me number 5 for a moment. This is, I have some excerpts from the book. We have about 40 pages. It's a beautiful book. And to think he wrote it at 13. The language is beautiful, very poetic. There's lots of Gemaras there, there's halacha there, there's psukim, there's philosophical ideas, and just the language itself is phenomenal, very poetic, and to think that he wrote it at 13 is just marvelous. Look at number 5. This is in the beginning of the book. He says, Eldad, whenever he saw his friend Meidad, he said, Meidad, you're busy gambling all your money away. So Meidad was Ki'isha Shaloi Shemei. Look at number 5. Meidad didn't take any heed. Loikam v'loi zah mimeno. You see, that's from a lashon from Megillah. Meidad didn't care what his friend told him, and he kept on gambling. Ad ki miyamim yamima, one day, Eldad was walking chutz le'ir l'ruach hayom. Eldad was going on a walk. Vayikar mikreyu, a happen chance, he bumps across Meidad re'eyu, his friend. V'hu choyshev machshavas, Meidad was deep in thought. Meidad was in a bad mood. And Eldad thinks to himself, you know why? Why is Meidad in a bad mood? He probably lost a lot of money in the card game today, in the poker game today. And Eldad said, Hapam azois, this time I'm going to send all my this time I'm going to ziddle him good. This time I'm going to give it to him good. Ula yishma, maybe he'll listen and understand. And Eldad opens his mouth, and he tells him, Kapam b'pam, he repeats the same drosh he gave every time. What are you doing? You're destroying your life, etc. V'yaneo Meidad, and Meidad responds, Ashaloi choshav, what Eldad didn't imagine. Ki hischil lefaru l'shabeach hatzchoik, because Meidad starts saying, you got it all wrong. Gambling is wonderful. V'roit, for anyone that pursues gambling is doing the right thing. And Eldad vayishto, Eldad was astonished, extremely astonished. He did not expect to hear that response. Vayam, Eldad retorted back. Umelibam haitzio milam, and from their hearts they spoke, each one on his path. And these are the words that they said. That's his introduction to the story. And look at number 6 on the side. This is one of the things that Medad tells Eldad, the guy that's doing the gambling. He says, Eldad, ki saravta ben amei haaretz. You're amongst simple folk that have decided levazoy sotayev to denigrate dvar atzchoy kazeh, gambling. You're following the masses at the great gambling. Until he says, incredible. A father and mother these days don't daven to Hashem that their kids shouldn't be murderers. They don't daven to God that their kids shouldn't be pimps or shouldn't be shaisim, shouldn't be drunkards. The only thing people daven is that their kids shouldn't be gamblers. This is what the gambler tells Eidod. I'm so pained for you that that this is concealed from you. Because not only are they speaking evil and falsehood, they're speaking falsehood, denigrating gambling. It's the opposite. The Eibush looks at gambling as a good thing, and it's purposeful and beneficial. So Eldad tells him, you're kidding? Eldad goes on a rampage that if you gamble, you violate all of the Aseret HaDibros. And Yehudah Aryeh gives a whole explanation. Now each one that says Dibros, you violate if you do. So number 7, Medad says, hold your horses. You think if someone gambles, they deny God? No, he says, he says, you know what I saw? I saw yesterday a person. He lost 400 gold coins in gambling. Didn't open his mouth. He didn't curse the day he was born. All he said was, God, you're righteous. But I know a guy that deals with grain. And the price of grain went down, and he was a merchant, and he realized how much money he lost, and he jumped off a roof and took his own life. So you're saying, on the contrary, I know people that gamble that are big mammon, everything that they lose the thing. Baruch Hashem, it's the will of God. I know people in other areas of work, and so he says, and Medad says gambling is just another way of parnasa. It doesn't have to lead a person far from God. Join me in number 8. In number 8 is a Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin. I'm not going through all the halachas of gambling tonight. Just a little bit, just to get a bit of a picture of this Yehudah Aryeh of Modena, because we're going to see a little bit here, we're going to see a little more about it later as well, because it really does define, for better or for worse probably, but it does define his life, and it's part of the reason that he's been completely sideswiped. But hopefully we'll be able to get a bit of an understanding of where he came from. In number 8, it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Elu heina psulim. These are those that are apostle to testify or to judge. Hamasachik bekuvya. This is in Daf Chav Daled in Sanhedrin. Masachik bekuvya is someone who plays with dice. Hamal v'beribis. Someone lends with interest. Mafriche yoinim is those that have doves. They race doves. Right, they bet on doves, which will allow horse betting. The soichere shvius are those that are merchants during Shemitah. They sell Shemitah produce. Rab Shimon, skip the Rab Shimon, go 2 lines later. Amar Rabbi Yehudah said, Rabbi Yehudah, Amosai, when is the dice thrower cancelled and disqualified from testimony? Bisman she'ein lehem umnes elu, if all they do is gamble. Avo yeshlen, if they have a job and this is just their side hobby, shaloyu, that's not gambling, they do something else, ksher in their kosher. The Gemara here quotes a very well-known debate. Mesachik bekuvya maika ovid, frek the Gemara, what did the dice thrower do wrong? What's wrong with playing with dice and betting some money? What's the big deal? So there's a famous debate between Rami Bar Chama and Rav Sheshes. Omar Rami Bar Chama, mishum dahava asmachta. It's a asmachta. Asmachta means you rely upon something, meaning like this. So I'll give you a case. I owe somebody $100, okay? I give you 50 today. So you say, where's the other 50? I need a month. You don't trust me. So I tell you, you know what? You have the document of the loan. Give the document to a third person to hold. Now, in the document, I still owe you 100. If I don't pay you those $50 at the end of the month, that third person will return to you the document, and you can claim another 100. in addition to the 50 I already gave. That's okay, that's a condition. Now, when I make such a condition, I really do plan on paying back. I do not think for a moment that this will eventuate, that I'll default on that 50 and end up having to pay you another 100. I don't assume that will happen at all. I just threw out this thing relying on the fact that this won't eventuate. So if it does eventuate, I don't have to pay you the extra money. That's called asmachta, because I obligated myself in something that I never imagined would actually happen. So, Rami Bar Choma says the same thing over here. When we gamble, I hope to win. Yeah, I told you if I lose, I'll give you the geld. But I really hope that doesn't happen. That's what Rami Bar Choma says. Rav Sheshes Amar, no, Kolki, this is not asmachtahi. Rav Sheshes says, no. In the case I told you about the $50 and the 100, I taka think I'm going to end up giving you that $50 at the end of the month. I don't think it will eventuate, right, to me defaulting, having to pay the extra. The whole thing was just was a guzma. It was an expression. It was just to satiate you now, tell you what you want to hear. But I never expected that to happen. But when you gamble and there's luck involved, you know from the outset that it's high chances you're going to lose. You do expect the very possible result that you will end up having to pay. So Rav Sheshes says it's not a problem of stealing. You don't have that issue over here. Ella, the issue of gambling is ein asukin b'yeshuvah shel olam. If someone gambles, so then they're not involved in bettering society, and therefore Rashi explains that if someone's completely involved in that, they don't understand what's right and what's wrong, and ownership and the rights and wrongs of monetary law, and such a person may lie in court, may testify falsely for monetary gain. That's why we can't accept him. So the Gemara says, what's the difference of Rami Bar Choma Rav Sheshes? I'll tell you the difference. The Gomer umnusa achrisi. If somebody has a job, but they gamble on the side, they know what commerce means. They know what shali and shalach means. They know it's wrong to take money to testify. You could trust them. You can only say they're not oisik in yeshuvas, they're not involved in society, if they're sitting in the casinos day and night. They're completely out to lunch. But according to Rami Bar Choma, that the other person really never intended to pay, and therefore you're not allowed to take his money. I don't care if that's what you do entire day, or as a hobby on the side. It's prohibited.
That's the same machlokes as Rabbi Yehudah in the Mishnah?
Exactly. So the Gemara there discusses that it seems to be the same debate in the Mishnah as well. What's interesting over here is, who does the halacha follow? The halacha really follows Rav Sheshes. In fact, the Rambam paskins in Laws of Testimony that if somebody gambles here and there and it's not their job, they're kosher for testimony. Because we go like Rav Sheshes, it's only a problem if that's your be-all and end-all. Then you're completely out to lunch, you don't know the rights and wrongs, you can't trust you. But if somebody has a profession, then they're trustworthy. In their own time, they do this and that, it doesn't disqualify them.
I have a pashut Aryeh, Chanukah.
Who are you bringing Aryeh from?
Klal Yisrael.
Would you saw Rabbonim throwing in money?
My amadavar.
You can't do that. You have to. You got to look at if a Rav gave a heter for that. There's minhagei shtus all the time in halacha. You don't just say go see amadavar. Look what people are doing. So hold on. The thing is though that the Rambam in the laws of stealing quotes Rami Bar Choma. The Rambam in the laws of Gzela says that when it comes to gambling, that when you take the money, you really shouldn't be taken because the other person never intended on giving it to you. It's an asmachta. He says it's rabbinic theft. So it's well known that the Rambam seems to contradict himself. And Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh, in his dialogue in Eldad and Meidad, goes into a whole thing about this. Eldad quotes, don't you know the Rambam in the Lords of Gzela says that taking the money by gambling is considered rabbinic theft and everything? Comes Meidad in number 9, and he said, you love it. He says like this, Libcha al yemar lashveni. Don't quote to me the Gemara of Sanhedrin Perek Zeh Beira. Ki gam me'ein alo nisto. You think I don't know it? I know it. V'yodaiti ki oleh somach kol posek asher diberu al hatzchak. I know anyone that bad mouths gambling quotes that Gemara. Now, va'af, even if maskinon lahalacha, that you're puzzled to judge and give testimony, he said it's a good thing. Kvaydon b'mekayim munach. It's a good thing. He says, because by testimony, don't you know a king can't give testimony? So every gambler is in good company. You can't give testimony. A king can't either. And we can't judge. It's the biggest bracha not to be able to judge. Nimtzu nekim, that we will never sin. And no takola, nothing wrong will happen through us. Don't you know the Mishnah Masechta Avos? Hachoisich atzmim, if someone removes themselves, precludes themselves from judgment, he removes from himself enmity and theft. It's the best thing not to judge. So he says, you're telling me if you gamble you can't judge? It's the biggest bracha not to judge. You're telling me I can't testify? Neither could a king. Okay, that's how, you see there's a bit of humor over here. And then Meldod goes to town by saying, you're quoting me one Rambam in the laws of Gzela, but the Rambam in Halach Hilchos of Eidos Paskins like Rav Sheshes, that is only if it consumes you, the gambling. If it's here and there, it's okay. And these two Rambams becomes a debate between Eldod and Meidod over here. Look at the bottom of the page. Meidod is not done. He says, you know what happens if you gamble? Gambling teaches you all the tricks of life. He says it teaches you how to suffer, how to take a loss. If someone doesn't gamble, then what if God forbid a business deal goes sour? How do you handle it? But if you've gambled, whatever. It didn't work. You lose some. You win some, you lose some. That's how the gambler talks, and it's part of his life. Thick skin. Right. For many people, you win some, you lose some is very hard to swallow. A business deal goes sour, it can be very difficult. But he says, if someone gambles, if a destruction comes his way, he knows how to bench God for the bad just like the good. He knows God gives and God takes. That's what he lives with every day. Every day he lives with you get and you lose. And if he spends money on nothing, he'll say, no, it's like I gambled. It's a comfort for everything. On everything he knows how to say, listen, you threw money away, it's like gambling.
It's a win-win situation.
He says more than that. From gambling, you teach yourself, you can sharpen your mind. He says, you teach yourself mathematics, right? Counting cards. He goes on to say, you can learn how to fool people, you can learn how to manipulate people. You can learn logic. You can learn how to argue. You can learn how to keep a straight face. He describes all of the positive elements from gambling. The book continues until in the maskan of the book, Meidod turns around and he tells Eldod, you know what? After everything's said and done, you're right.
Let's go to the...
No. Meidod say, I'm putting on a happy face, right? I've destroyed my life. Meidod says, on the outside I'm defending, I'm putting on a smile, but inside I've destroyed my life. That's how he ends the book. He wrote this book at 13. Very imaginative. 13. Everything we read over here, it's a 13-year-old wrote it.
Kids like playing casino.
No. He knew what was going on. He had good gewusst. He knew what was going on.
He knew the Gemara backwards and forwards.
Exactly. He lived in Venice. It's like a kid today. No one goes on in the stadium by the football. So they know gambling in Venice. If it was part of life, what you're going to see is how this is ultimately going to consume his own life. The irony that the guy that wrote a book at 13, ultimately denouncing gambling, this is going to rock his life throughout. Join me on the next, on this very page, join me in number 4. This is a whopping story that he writes. At the age, I think he was about 18, when his mother tells him, I have a shidduch for you. The shidduch is my niece.
Now that's gambling.
And people ask you, did you ever do something nuts? Yeah, I got married. So his mother says, I have a niece, her name is Esther. and I would love for you to marry her. And his mother urged him, and somehow his mother convinced his father. His mother convinced her sister, the mother of the Kala. Before he knew it, he was basically officially engaged. But look what he says in number 4. Ubein kacha sisi shailas shalom b'tfila. He said, I wanted to ask heaven. I wanted to get an answer from above. B'tfila I davened, b'li hashpa, without summoning any angels. Summoning angels is dangerous business. Without summoning angels, I wanted to get an answer from Shamayim. Is this girl my destined? Liroy so isha hanigzeres lizavugi. Who is the woman who's decreed for me?
How old was he here?
18. 18.
He was able to summon.
Yeah, exactly. Because he chose not to go down that path.
Wow.
That's why I think all those that pass harsh judgment on him have never really read his words. And just the cholamte, I had a dream. V'nei zokein echad oiches biyad, the old man holding my hand. V'yivieni, this old man takes me to the wall. Asher sham tavnis, there was a painting, a painting with a paroiches, with a canvas. There was a painting with a paroiches in front, a mantle. And the old man removed the masveh, the covering, and I saw a painting of Esther, my first cousin. The Gavin, I saw the colorful clothes. As I'm looking at her face, all of a sudden her face changes. The painting, this is in the dream. The vision, what? It morphs. Nishtanis oisa tzura, the picture changes. V'tovei acheres tachtea. And there's a new girl's face. Ashaloi kavati bo eina heitev, but I couldn't see clearly in the dream who the other girl was. I woke up and I was sure that this was an answer from heaven that I'm not supposed to marry her. Right? I'm meant to marry someone else. I told the dream to my father and my mother. Of course they didn't believe. But he knew this wasn't Stam a dream. He had asked heaven for this dream, and this was the dream that he got. He knew it meant business.
Shilas Cholim?
Yeah, Shilas Cholim. It could be on the first line when it says Shilas Shalom, it could be the shin's a mistake meant to be Cholim, but I don't know. Continue. V'kibalnu, he says that they went to Venice and he met his cousin. V'kibalnu kinyan, we made a pact to go ahead with the marriage. Everyone was very happy. And guess what the girl Esther was wearing? The exact clothing that I saw in my dream, which was a couple months before. How haunting is that? And I showed her to my mother, and I belevushim gavim, with the covered clothes and the kishutim, that I told her it was more than a year before. I told her, this is exactly how I saw in the dream. But his mother's not going to call off the wedding. He said, a dream's a dream, a dream's a dream. And she was be'emes yafa b'no, she was beautiful, she was wise. And I said, you know what? Matzah v'loy moitzah eya. The Gemara says in Brachas, there's a pasuk called Matzah Isha, Matzah Toiv, you found a woman found good. There's another pasuk, Matzah Aniyasa Isha, I find a woman more bitter than death. And the Gemara says in Brachas that in Eretz Yisrael they would ask the Chassan, which one are you? Are you the Matzah or Matzah? And he said, I'm going to be the Matzah. I'm going to find... Anyhow, the time to get married was the 13th of Sivan in the year Shin Nun. That's 1590. 15... Yud Gimel Sivan. After Shavuos. Right after Shavuos. The Echtev... So, Ladoini Avi, I wrote to my father who was in Bologna and he came. The Ekra Lahuvai, I called my beloved and the Kroiva, my relatives, and right after Shavuos, we went all happy and toiv. We went to Venice. He was living near Venice that day. We all went to Venice, and when we came there, we found the Kala was ill. His fiance was ill. Everyone said, nah, she's a little bit of diarrhea, refuah, she's going to be better. But day after day, the chayli got worse and worse. Ad ki not salamas, till she was on the verge of passing. Her heart was like the heart of the lion, v'loy nivala, and she wasn't perturbed due to her situation. The day of her death, she calls me, vatachabek vatanashikli. Okay, he writes this. She gives a chibuk and a nishuk, and she says, I know this is chutzpahdik, yodaiti, I know ze azus metzach. We're not married yet, this is inappropriate. But God knows There's already been a full year we were engaged. We never touched each other. Even be'etzba ktana, even our pinkies never touched for a full year. And now I'm dying. So this is, at least this. Crazy, huh? At least this. Va'ata, at the moment of death, reshus mavis nitanli. At the time of death, certain things are allowed. And she says, I wasn't zoiche to be your wife. Very powerful thing. Loi zochisi li, I wasn't zoiche to be your wife. What can I do? This is a decree in heaven. May God fulfill his will. And she said, please call the rabbi. She wanted to do vidui. And the Rav came and she said vidui. And she got a bracha from her parents and from my mother, and then she passed away. And he all saw this before in a dream a year before. You say, this guy is no simple person. This guy he has access to heaven. Next page. Next page, in number 10. Yeah, it's okay. Here are some tidbits, and you'll see where we're going with this. He says, his wife gave birth to a boy. Number 10, about 15 days after by the way, all of these excerpts, it wasn't so easy. It's a big book, and I had to find, these are not in a row. These are all scattered.
How many years later is it number 10?
What happened was, thank you for that. Right after his fiance passes away, her mother tells him, I have another daughter. Her name is Rachel, and she's just as good as Esther. Yeah, it is also his first cousin, a sister. And he writes, actually, it sounds like he wasn't as excited about her as the older sister, but he said that everyone was so broken by what happened. How could he be the Schwanz and say, no, I don't want to marry her? And also he says that his fiancée, before she took her last breath, hinted to the fact that she wanted him to marry the sister. And his mother wanted him to, and he was a good Yiddish boy. What? He doesn't see, you wonder, he doesn't say that, right?
It's not like Mashiach lived to his first one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it says. He says she was beautiful, she was wise, motzah, he says motzah, toiv. I mean, that's how you write it, right? So number 10, he's already married to his other cousin, and she gives birth. 15 days after my wife gives birth, she became extremely ill. And she had a fever 20 days. And then later, she nafla lemishkov, she couldn't even get out of bed. She had a disease, fitichi, I don't know, anybody said? What? Petechiae, what is that, blood clot? Something like that?
Both things?
Okay, there we go. So it's blood clotting, good. And the illness of his wife got worse and worse, and she went crazy until she was mamas at the gates of death. And the doctor said there is no hope. And it was already Wednesday, the 5th of Sivan, 1594. Kimat porach rucha, she almost took her last breath. They already prepared for her tzarchei kvur, they already prepared for her. And I cried on her harbe. By now they're married already a couple of years. And I asked the kid, psaikli psukecha, just like Yehudah did.
He had a son, he had a kid.
No, I asked a certain kid, tell me what you're learning. And the kid said, Laman Yirbu Yemechem. He says, I davened and the Eibishter answered me, and the illness lightened up until she was healed. Yes, and this is a modus operandus was Psoikli Psukecha.
It's not menachish or something?
In number 11, you'll see how he was, after his parents passed away, he was still in touch with them. His father once came to him in a dream, and he told his father, Tata, you used to tell me that while someone's alive, they don't know what a soul is. Now that you're in the world of truth, tell me, what is a nefesh? What taki is a neshama? His father said, you know what I'm doing in heaven? I'm eating and drinking all day. That's what we do here. She said, Tata, the Gemara says in Brachas, in Olam Haba, there's no achila, no shti, there's no eating, there's no drinking. So his father says, you think that's what I meant? Don't you know, remember the pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim? It says about the Nadav and Avihu and the elders that they saw the Eibishter, vayochlu vayishtu, they ate and they drank. And Unclus says it means they had so much delight, it was if they ate and they drank. That was the dream that he had with his father, after his father passed away. In number 11, his mother comes to him in a dream. I just want to show you, this guy is not a run-of-the-mill. And
Was he smoking something?
in number 11, he says it was right before Friday night. It was Friday afternoon, before Friday night. Betnumis al mishkavi, I guess, fell asleep on my bed. I had a dream. What? Pi kaballah. Durmita dezo, it's called. That there's a big tzaddikim would go to sleep. The Maggid of Mizrich, famously, the Maggid of Mizrich Friday afternoon would sleep, and Rabbi Aaron Karliner was in Mizrich was saying Shir Hashirim, and a messenger came to Aaron Karliner and told him, you got to stop saying Shir Hashirim. The Maggid said when he says Shir Hashirim, all the angels in heaven, they dance. And I can't sleep when the angels in heaven are dancing. So the Behillel Paritcher told over that story, and he said, people think, who's the hero of the story? Rabbi Aaron Karliner, when he says Shir Hashirim, all the Malachim dance. No. The real hero is the Maggid, that his sleep is more important than the Malachim dancing in heaven. Anyhow, so he fell asleep. I had a dream. My mother... What?
And I only get naps on Shabbos.
Friday afternoon.
Gotta start Friday afternoon.
That's it. They say that the Rebbe, during Mincha, on Friday afternoon, during Chazoras Hashatz, right? They say he would temporarily doze off for a split moment. And people noticed that something that didn't happen on a regular Mincha. Well, I heard it was during Chazoras Hashatz Mincha. I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. I don't know. You heard? Right, that Indian of when you're in tune with heaven. I think it probably happened because he's in tune with heaven. It happened. It happened. Anyhow, he fell asleep. He says, my mother came and she told him the most scary thing. Meheira, meheira, tiya imi. Very soon you'll be with me. Now, his mother had just passed away, and she tells him, very soon you're going to be with me. Now, before he wakes up, he says, I answered her patiently. I said, when's this going to happen? She said, the last days of Pesach. I woke up, I was frightened. He says, I went to the Shloime Sefarno. From the Sefarno, that's Rabbi Vadia's Sefarno. Someone else from the family. It was a Sefarno family. He quotes, all in Italy, right? Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh quotes this guy a number of times. This Rabbi Shloime was his big chacham that he would ask. And he asked Rabbi Shloime, what does this mean? What does this mean? He interpreted to me, he said, what it means is, my wife's going to have a daughter. I should call my daughter the name of my mother. That's what it means that we'll be together. Well, not that I'll join her in heaven. She's going to join me down here by my daughter being named after her. It's interesting. His mother's name was Rachel, nicknamed Diana. Diana.
See what it is with
Diana, but he said his wife's name though was also Rachel. But no one changed their name because his mother went by the name Diana. But how's he going to name his daughter? He can't name her Rachel because his wife's name's Rachel. So his daughter just became Diana.
What is it called?
They weren't Sfardim. No, it was Ashkenazim from France, yeah. So, and it's very interesting. So he's in touch with his father. He's in touch with his mother. He had 3 sons. Okay, now it's going to get a little sad, okay? But this is just what it is. He has 3 boys. Mordechai, Yitzchak, and Zvulun. In number 12, he says, when my Bechor was born, I wanted to call him Mordechai after my Zayda, the first guy we spoke about, the guy, the big Rav, the big Pesach. But the Loyhoya Chafetz, my father told me, don't name your son Mordechai, because I had a brother. My father, because Hayali Ben, my father had a son called Mordechai, a beautiful boy. He had the name and he died at the age of 24. So, right, you have Mordechai the Zayda, Yitzchak, and the son Yehudah Aryeh. Yehudah Aryeh had a brother, Mordechai.
So Mordechai got murdered. And he
The Zayda, right.
His son, after his grandfather, who had an untimely power.
The Zayda, right. The Zayda was killed. The Zayda was killed. His father, named Mordechai, died young. He wanted to do it again. And he says, I didn't listen to my father. Listen. He says, I loved the name of my Zayda. I had so much respect. He was a Gavra Rabbi Ka'amr, like I said before. I needed to have a Mordechai after my Zayda. I said, I'm not going to listen to my father. I called him Mordechai. Oy li vavoy. When my son was 26, and we're going to see this, he died. Mordechai Yotza, based on the pasuk in Megillah, he took my heart with him. He left me in the depth of sorrow and agony and sighing, until the depths of sighing. What happened to his kids? Well, I'm going to read with you the stories. Join me, number 17.
Just if you name a kid after the Alter Rebbe, does it mean you're going to end up in prison for a year?
There is an idea not naming people after somebody that suffered. There are those that say, why when you name a kid Yirmiyah today or Yeshaya today, why don't we call them Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu?
Aryeh, he died by...
The first Aryeh. It's just Yeshaya. You don't call them Yeshayahu or Yirmiyahu.
Even naming or just?
Yeah, even naming.
Because,
Oh, you know someone?
my brother named somebody.
Okay, all right. So, okay, next. No, so the Reb Reuven Margolis says the reason is because Yohu is Yud Kei Vav, but it says that until Mashiach comes, Hashem's name is separate. The Yud Kei and the Vav Kei are separate till Mashiach comes. So Reb Reuven Margolis feels maybe Al Derech Hadrush, you don't name Yohu because Yud Kei Vav, that will only happen when Mashiach comes. But the simple explanation is you don't name someone after someone that suffered. Yeshaya was killed by his grandson Menashe. Yirmiyah, we had a shir a few weeks ago, had a very hard life, and according to some was killed by the Yidden. In fact, I know somebody who's not a Lubavitcher, who wanted to name their kid Menachem Mendel, and he went to his Rav, one of the big Rabbanim in the Welt, who told him, name him Menachem Mendel, but have in mind Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Rimenov, one of the early Chassidic Rebbes. Don't have in mind the Rebbe, our Rebbe, because he didn't have children. Yeah.
Somebody said this now.
Yes, yeah, a big guy.
Named somebody
A big guy said it. No. He said, no, name the name like you wanted to, but have in mind for the Rimanover. After the Tzemach Tzedek. No, the reason is very simple. It's because we're Ashkenazim, we're not Sfaradim. Moshe Rabbeinu loy meis. Yeah. Okay.
Cut him up into 4 pieces.
At least. Okay, I'm not. Now I definitely won't tell you who it was. Could be recorded him all the time. Anyhow. And look at number 17. What happened to his kids? So what happened to Mordechai is Mordechai got involved in alchemy. Alchemy was big in those days. And he says Mordechai was particularly successful, not in transforming metal into gold, but metal into silver. Lead into silver. You ever heard of that one? And he said, By the way, modern day alchemy is to melt pennies, because the quarter that you get after the copper you get after it's melted is worth more than the penny, right?
They're not made out of copper.
Oh, yeah.
They're made out of not anymore.
It's more chemistry.
So,
It's the predecessor of chemistry.
okay, right. So that idea of bringing something to a greater status. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh describes how he's witnessed how successful this was. This was actually happening, turning lead into silver. He said, but I'll tell you what happened. He says, my son Mordechai was into this big time. He was heading, this was his occupation, was alchemy. But Godam Achet, because of our sins, it happened in Sukkot. It was the year 1615. 1615. Pisoim yorad meiroishe lepiv dom harbe. From my son, blood started pouring from his head into his mouth.
Because of his sins.
He says why.
Was the alchemist?
Yeah, but Uma'oz, at that point he stopped doing it. Ki Amru, they said maybe the idim, the steams, Ha'ashanim is the smokes from the arson, arsenicos, arson, right? And sali is salt in Italian. All those things that alchemists use, hanichnosim, but that enter into his head, that is breathing in, cause blood to loosen up. Does that make sense?
The arsenic is very...
And it causes blood to what? Right.
Very dangerous.
Like mercury poisoning, that what they say Isaac Newton suffered as well. But does it make sense that blood would come from his head?
But alchemy has been around for 1,000 years. Haven't they learned a lesson by then?
Now they do. Now you...
You know how many people had a hard end in alchemy?
300 years.
Alchemists like explosive. You do it until your laboratory explodes.
500 years ago.
Anyhow, for more about alchemy, you already listened to that class? Okay, so what am I going to tell you now? Okay. Hizikul l'roisha, it hurt his head, and for 2 years he was that way until he passed away. That's what happened to his son Mordechai. The next story is even worse, if I could say that. His other son called Zvulun. He had a son called Zvulun. He writes, why did I name him Zvulun? He says, because nobody names their kid Zvulun. What did Zvulun do wrong? He said, I should have quoted. He says, wasn't Zvulun one of the Shvatim? And people ignore him. I'm going to name my son Zvulun. In particular, Zvulun lived on the coast. And I live in Venice. Zvulun, the Chayf Yamim Yish, lives on the coast.
The Canaries.
No, Mediterranean. So ships would come. Yotsu, he says, Yotsu min machbe. He said, what happened was like this. My son Zvulun got involved in thugs, Italian thugs, and one time he says that my son was hiding, and these people were hiding concealed as well. Yotsu, this group of thugs came out of the machbe of where they were hiding. Va'asu atzmam, and they made believe as if they want to hit somebody else. V'hamamzer, Yehudah Aryeh calls all these people mamzerim. If you read the whole page, he says mamzer, and actually most of them have Jewish names. This mamzer, that mamzer, because ultimately they all killed his kid, as you're going to see. Hamamzer koroloi, this mamzer called my son and said, come, I need your help. Re'echa nilchamim, your friends are fighting, come to help them. V'hanimer, my swift kid, he ran quickly. V'arvel, he ran so quick in front of me, I didn't realize it was him. Because Yehudah Aryeh was there, he knew his son was in trouble. But his son was called by his friends. He ran so swiftly that Aryeh couldn't recognize, maybe it was dark. The takeoff, it says, as soon as my son exited his hiding place, they surrounded him, they hit him on his head, chaburs, they made wounds, I didn't see any blood. And then in his throat, they stabbed him with a sword or a spear, until he left them screaming, Tata, Tata, I'm dying. His father was there witnessing. And Zvulun, saying, Tata, Tata, I'm dying. And the blood was shoisus v'yoytze kamayan. Like he couldn't even make it to our home, so he went to our relative, my brother-in-law Yochanan. And he put himself on the bed, covered in blood. But by the time the doctor got there, so much blood had left him. He says, Kashe chovesh makotze, when the doctor bandaged him up, he didn't have enough blood inside to keep going. Couldn't survive. And his right side became paralyzed. He lost hergish, became paralyzed. He said vidui, and he said his last things, and yotza midaita, he lost his mind because of the pain in his head and the wound in his head. And he didn't say another word that made sense. He remained like this for 4 nights and 3 days until it was Chol HaMoed. His neshama left him. He was buried on that day next to his brother, my son Reb Mordechai. So now he says, and on his aron, where when he was taken, they put all of his clothes that were covered in blood. He says to the cry, Ma'ulakoil Zakosi, he says, my cry and the cry of my wife, there wasn't an eye or a heart there that wasn't flowing with tears. That's how he describes. Right? Very graphic.
Clearly a loyal friend, this Lord. That's how they got him. They called him like they needed him.
And he went. Knowing, he was hiding, knowing that.
It was a setup.
He owed them money.
Yeah.
Sold him out.
Money is probably money.
Exactly, that was a silver.
In number, look at the next one in number 19. He said like this. He said it's true. If not what, the Gemara says, the same way Hashem gives koyach and a tzaddik to receive a schar, Hashem gives koyach and a wicked to to receive their punishment. It's a scary Gemara that the Eibishter keeps a Rasha alive in order to handle the pain. He says, that's how I felt.
What's the Lashon?
He quotes it. He says, it's impossible that I could have remained alive, to remain alive, that ma'akev ha'atzar, with the pain that held me from then until now. There isn't a day she'einenu be'einai kechodesh, that isn't like a month. It's as if my son is in front of me, and the gzeira that you forget about those that passed didn't apply to me. He says, it's already 3 years since my son died, and everywhere I turn, I see him. Wherever I turn is there. He had another son called Yitzchak, who he writes all the tzaras. This Yitzchak was up to trouble. He was never home. He writes how I wished he would come home just to keep me company. But ultimately, he says, Yitzchak did his own thing, and he even got married, and then he abandoned his family, and he went to Brazil. Brazil. Yeah. Italy wasn't exotic enough. Brazil, the new world.
It was very new then.
Okay, that's why it was exotic. It was intriguing. In the early 1600s, no, there was 1600s. It was established. There was Yiddish communities in Brazil in the early 1600s already. Yeah.
From Holland.
So now he also had some other tzaras. He had a number of children that passed away in their youth. He had a boy, he had a girl, he had lots of tzaras. Most of the book is tzaras, all of his relatives. His brothers, his sisters, his nieces, his nephews, everybody. And
Do you have any kids that
I thought he's the cool guy. He moves on.
hold on. What time is it by now? Hold on.
Oh, I think you don't know.
He went to Brazil.
Join me in number 13.
Still living there till today.
In number 13, he says later on his wife lost it completely. There were so many tsaras. First of all, they lost all their money. They were extremely tight on parnasa. That's part of the reason he gambled. He was highly, highly tight on parnasa. Writing poetry, you don't get much. He taught people all the time. He was a Rosh Yeshiva. He had a yeshiva in Venice. Yes, he had a yeshiva in Venice. Those days, he was a Rav. He was the most beautiful darshan. He writes the only thing that was really successful for him was his drushes. Now people didn't pay for drushes. Everything he did, nothing brought in any parnasa. And there were so many tsaras. His wife lost her whole family as well, her siblings, and again 2 kids they lost when they were young, and then the 2 sons we saw over here. And she spent a number of years being sick. She ultimately lost her mind. She went insane. And look how he describes it in number 13. He says, in Chodesh Sivan, in Sivan of that year, a Ruach Zara, a strange spirit, began in my wife, and she's quarreling with me, and to anger me. He says, the Shemada V'chilyon, the destruction, and the Shemam, and the desolation, both financially, Gufi bodily, Kvoidi, my honor, Nafshi, my soul, till today, all 4 were crushed. He says, even if I would live for another 100 years, I would never be healed from what my wife put me through. I would never recover. B'shum tzad, and any of the 4 things. The Eibishter knows if she fought with me for nothing, I did nothing wrong. Ein mitzidi alma, I did nothing wrong. I can't even write chsilusa, all of the foolishness that happened then. He had it hard. He had it hard. Hold on, wait. Look at number 14. Look what he writes. Yishtabach Hashem, praise be God. He didn't give me any joy from my children. From the 3 of them, all I have is pain and suffering. But I have my students that I raised. Talmidei Chacham, teachers amongst the Jews. My students are my children. They will comfort me. The great Rabbi of Venice after him, Rabbi Aryeh Fijo, was a big Rav, was a student of his, and there were others. He says, my students are my comfort. Look at the next one, 15. He says, Ein zekim avonoisa, my sins have caused. Ki al gimel bonim shahayu li, on my 3 sons I could say, one of them died, one was killed, one was exiled. Those are the 3 kids. I have no comfort in my affliction except for I had a grandchild, Yitzchak, who was the son of my daughter Diana. That was the only comfort that he had. And he writes again in another place. He says, because of all my sins, it happened to me that my 3 kids One died, one was killed, one was exiled. So there's a lot of lamenting. Go to the left side, number 20. He was heavily involved in gambling. When did it begin? Unclear. But throughout his autobiography, he writes about it again and again. How, and he almost always lost. He never writes, maybe one time he hints that he won a couple dollars. He had horrible mazel, real Yiddish luck, Yiddish mazel. He was always losing money. In number 20, he says that there was a wealthy Yid that said, I want you to write a commentary on Chumash. And his help was enlisted to compose a commentary on Chumash. He says, I did a couple parshas, Bereshis, Pinchas, Matas, Maseh. Because I couldn't tear myself away from gambling. And that's why I was procrastinating. So this wealthy guy who was paying me, he saw that I wasn't diligent. He took it all away from me, and he said, you know what, I'm going to find somebody else. So he started this beautiful job, and in fact, there are manuscripts of the commentary he wrote on these 4 parashas. It was never printed, but the manuscripts are somewhere, I think, in England. But he says that he lost the opportunity because he was procrastinating. He was in the casinos. In number 21, he says, in Kislev, he gives the year, I continued gambling. From then, only evil surrounded me. In number 22, he says, during Hanukkah, the Satan convinced me to gamble. And from Hanukkah till the following Shavuos, that's a long time, I lost 300 ducats. Wow. And from then until Erev Hanukkah of the next year, he says, I was careful learning and I didn't gamble anymore. I was able to pay all those that were harassing me. But then he said, I continued gambling, I lost a lot. In number 23, he says, all the days after my daughter was engaged, for 2 years, Shenimshechu, the shidduch of my daughter, I went after the hevel matz, I continued gambling for 2 years while his daughter was engaged. V'chol ma'aser yehevel v'toh, and everything I did was vanity. And he actually writes, when it came to the wedding, he couldn't pay for the wedding. He had lost everything in gambling.
The most vulnerable Rabbi.
This is the Rav. He's a Rosh Yeshiva. He was hired by many Gvirim in Venice and nearby towns to teach their kids. He was the greatest darshan. When he would speak and give a drasha, the shul was full. Not just with Yidden, with Goyim. You know, like Jackie Mason likes to joke, right? That his jokes were so good that until Goyim filled up the shul. But this was he writes that Poshet, the place Goyim would come and hear him give drashas. He spoke a beautiful Latin, and he was well versed in Torah, but many chachmas, and also Christian beliefs as well. He had many Christian students. At that time, it wasn't unheard of.
You mentioned this Eliyahu.
Yeah, hold on. What's the next page over here? Let's just go this quick. Comes the next page. In number 24, if you could imagine that the rabbi of the town is spending his nights in the casino, how many Jews were going to follow suit? Gambling was rampant. So there was an emergency meeting, an undercover meeting between the heads of the community, and Rabbi Aryeh was conveniently not invited. And they made a cherem against those that will gamble. He finds out about it. He said, apparently I'm the Rav over here. How come I wasn't invited? Look what he writes in number 24. He says, it was in the year 1630 in Adar. He said, I had a debate, we're number 24, with the men of the Vad and the leaders of the country. They made a haskama that they, already 2 years before, to prohibit all types of gambling with a cherem. And I came there, I said, listen, I'm not here l'shabech, I'm not here to say gambling is good. That's what I wrote maybe in Eldad and Meidad. I'm not here to say that it's good. But you don't have a right to put such people in cherem. Lo hoya koyach, you don't have koyach in your hands, and you don't have the right to be machrim, and to bring so many people to a michshol. You're creating all these sinners. Without that chayrim, these are people who gamble. You're labeling them sinners. And he said, I wrote a whole psak about this. It was good, it was strong. I printed it with lead. And I sent it everywhere. B'chol tfutzas Yisrael. And you should know he had the last word. Although he was biased, he was known as a gambler, but his psak was accepted, the chayrim was off. The chayrim was off.
Did he say intentionally he printed with lead?
So, is the issue that he had only the fact that he was a gambler? It's more than that. People today, I've seen many people today look back and say, all of these Christian students that he had, he was teaching Torah to the Christians. And I say, we know for a fact that he was not the only one that did that. The famous Rabbi Eliyahu the grammarian, was poor, and at some point in his life, he had to live in the house of a priest. And he even quotes the priest, the pshat, in Tanakh. And that in Italy, that was normal. And Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh Modena Fakert, he prides himself. I was able to sanctify the Eibish's name. All these Christians look at me, and they look at Yiddishkeit as the gem of God's crown. What greater Kiddush Hashem is that? Since when are you running? If you grow up not having anything to do with the Goyish world around you, then if anyone does that, they're a kaifer. On the contrary, Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh felt it was the greatest accomplishment, his greatest honor to be Mekadosh. He writes this to Mekadosh the Eibish's name. He writes about this, the Christian students that he taught to, the respect that he was given.
It's also for grateful Torah.
What?
It's also for grateful.
But the Shev, anything related to their Sheva mitzvahs, they're allowed to do, which is a big chunk of Torah.
You mentioned Odali, or they're making a makub, the other guy a makub.
Oh, hold on. We're gonna get about Makubah. Oh, hold on. You'll see where. Hold on.
Says I think 51 mitzvahs are from other different stuff.
Hold on. We're still building up. We're still building up. Yeah. No. Get good. In number 26, he wrote many Sfarim. He has a sefer of his drushes called Midbar Yehudah, the desert of Yehudah. Midbar Yehudah. It's a sefer of his drushes. Beautiful drushes. And on Purim, he has a little vort that people like to quote. Look at number 26. He says, on Shabbos before Purim, it says, Yom HaZikaron, it's a day to remember Amalek. Chazal commanded us to read Parsha Zocher and to fulfill the mitzvah of remembering. Why don't we do it on Purim? Why don't we read Parsha Zocher on Purim itself? He said it's simple. On Purim, you have to get shikr to the point you don't know anything, so you can't remember anything. You have to get shikr ad lo yada. V'lo yeizch is not a time to remember anything; it's a time to forget. Mashke makes you forget. So how could you have a mitzvah to remember on something at the time when you're full of forgetfulness? And he says Gevaldik. It says V'lo zocher Sarah mashkim es Yosef vayishkacheu. When Yosef is trying to get out of the pit, the Sar HaMashkim, the master of the one of pouring the wine, forgot Yosef. Why? When you deal with mashke, you don't remember anything. So Lo Zocher v'Yishkachei forgot him. On Purim, you're dealing with mashke. You can't remember anything. The Shabbos before, you could remember. A cute word that he remembered on Purim. That's a cute word that he said.
What was his gadlus?
What was his gadlus? Okay. So the main thing here is not, we're going to see the controversy. He was, according to many, he was the chief rabbi of Venice, where there were many Yidden. And not just that, but he was famous there and all around the entire world. And I'll show you in a minute how we know that. During his time, he was a legend. He wrote many Sfarim. He wrote a sefer called Ziknei Yehudah, which is his halachic responsa. He has a famous letter where he holds you don't have to wear a yarmulka. He paskins that you're allowed to walk in the street without a yarmulka.
Who said we need a yarmulke, actually?
Okay, good. Well, there's Gemaras that speak about not being begili rosh. There's a... Hold on. It's a big sugya. We'll have a shir about it one time, but hold on. He has a letter where... Now, hold on. You have to understand, he writes why he wrote the letter. He says that I saw a rabbi rebuking. chastising Yidden who walking on the street without a yarmulke. So that drove me to write a letter describing that halachically you don't have to. And in one of his letters he says, even I, when it's hot outside, if I speak in front of a dignitary, I'll take off my head covering. Which implies that usually he wore one. But he says that there are times you take it off. And he says for the average guy, Yid in the street, you're going to yell at him for not wearing a yarmulke? Who do you think you are? And he goes through a whole letter saying why he believes halachically that it's not required to cover your head in the street. He wrote this letter. Oh, today, all the from a Yidden, how could you say such a thing? Look, he was so modern, he was beyond the pale, how could you trust a word that he says? He has gotten so much flack over the last couple decades over a letter like that.
Is that the only reason?
The gambling was a big thing. But no. His main crime that he's accused of is denouncing Kabbalah. Let me explain. He believed in everything. Hold on. He believed in alchemy. He studied everything there was to learn, except Kabbalah. Not only he didn't study Kabbalah, he wrote a work denouncing Kabbalah and denouncing the Zohar, that he feels the Zohar is not from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he called the book Aryeh, The Lion Roars. His name's Yehudah, The Lion Roars. It was in manuscript for many years, okay? It was in manuscript for many years, until about 100 years after he passes away. There's a young man by the name of Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the famous Ramchal, in Italy, in Padua, who hears about this manuscript. The Ramchal is Mr. Kabbalah. And he actually wrote a Zohar Tinyana, he wrote a second Zohar, because he claimed that he had an angel that told him that where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai left off, you're going to continue, etc., etc.
Also Italy.
Yeah, in Padua. And the Ramchal was incensed that this rabbi, Yehudah Aryeh, wrote a sefer against Kabbalah. It's a long sefer, debunking Kabbalah. And he wrote a sefer to knock it off. It's called Choker u'Mekubal. It's a dialogue between the Choker, between the philosopher and the Kabbalist. And in it, the Ramchal tries to defend and prove the authenticity of Kabbalah. Look at number 29. This is a letter, a great letter, that the Ramchal writes to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yeshaya Basan. Rabbi Yeshaya Basan is a big Kabbalist and Rav as well in Italy. And the Ramchal writes this to his Rebbe. Look at number 29, a fascinating letter. Agid l'kvoy trust, and let me tell to your honor, Dvar Chiddush, something new. Hayoy mamish, today I got a letter from a judge. Akvila Pika Hayadua, there's a judge, a guy, Akvila Pico, you know him, he's from Venice, he's a judge there. He wrote to me, Bekama mini tachnunim, asking me, she'echtav loidaiti, that I should tell him my opinion. Because he had a machloikus between another asar, a minister there, with the Iran Echad, with the villager, based on Kabbalah. Is Kabbalah real or not? Shehu kayam. So one person said, Kabbalah is so, these are Christians arguing, Kabbalah is so holy, it reveals the depth of Torah. And this Iran, this villager denied it and said, Kabbalah is rubbish. And this villager was quoting Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena in his Sefer, who shows that Kabbalah has no Yesod and it's all a waste of time. So says the Ramchal to his Rebbe, Yira Kvoi Terasai, look, Ad Heich, until where the bitter fruits of this man has reached, of Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. Even by the Goyim his poison has spread, that they don't believe in Kabbalah. And then the Ramchal continues, he's writing this in the 1730s. The Gam also, he says, there's a wealthy, noble woman in Geneva. She's French. She sent to me in Venice with supplications. She's a very wise woman. And she asked me about Kabbalah. What's the deal? Is it true or not? This Goyish woman knows all the words of the Arizal from beginning to the end. Nifleisi ma'od, I was so amazed to hear her. And the Ramchal is asking his Rebbe, should I put out this sefer which is going to defend Kabbalah? Because Ramchal was embroiled in his own controversy.
Not to create a problem, but how there's a goy woman in Geneva is able to read the Arizal, was it translated?
The Kabbalah Center. You never heard of the Kabbalah Center in Geneva? Here you got it. She ran the Kabbalah Center. She was running the Kabbalah Center. She was running. So once the Ramchal wrote these words, and he wrote a whole sefer negating the arguments of Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena, who attacks Kabbalah, so that's considered his greatest crime. Let me show you something he writes in his sefer. Look at number 28. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh in his sefer writes that, you know what really bothered him? He says that the Ramak Reb Moshe Cordovero before him, and the famous Avodas HaKodesh, Rab Meir Ibn Gabbai, before him, they write that unless you learn about the 10 spheres, unless you learn Kabbalah, you don't know God. You don't even know what you're talking about. You could be an expert in Gemara and Halacha, and you still you have no connection to God. And he said, what? You're telling me the Rambam, assuming the Rambam didn't learn Kabbalah, all these great people are far from God? How could you say such a thing? This really turned Yehudah Aryeh of Modena off. The fact that the Kabbalah said that without Kabbalah, you are ignorant of godliness.
The judgment, basically.
This statement that without Kabbalah you're ignorant of godliness, he felt was you're condemning the greatest Yiddish minds of all time. He felt was completely off, and it really turned him off from Kabbalah, especially to defend the honor of the Rambam. He writes somewhere, I wrote the whole book just to defend the honor of the Rambam, because there were Kabbalists in Italy saying, and a lot of fake Kabbalists, beginners, saying, if you don't learn Kabbalah, you're no one, and the Rambam didn't learn Kabbalah. He was incensed. And to defend the honor of the Rambam, he went to an extreme to say, Kabbalah, who Kabbalah, what Kabbalah? Look what he writes in number 28. He says like this, the Kabbalists say that not everyone's mind can handle Kabbalah. And he quotes a story of Rabbi Yosef Kaira. The famous story of Yosef Kaira wanted to learn with the Arizal, and the Arizal told Rabbi Yosef Kaira, the Kabbalah for you is the Kabbalah of the Ramak, who was actually a student of Rabbi Yosef Kaira in Nigla. You could learn his Kabbalah. My Kabbalah is not for you. Rabbi Yosef Kaira said, try me. He tried and he would fall asleep. So says Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh, wait a second. When you say that not everyone's mind can handle Kabbalah, it means one of two things. It means either A, that Pasha you don't have the mental capacity to understand. B, your soul is not refined enough. He says, so what happened? What went wrong with Rabbi Yosef Kaira? Which one? He says in number 28, if it's A, that he didn't have a clear enough mind to understand, you're telling me about the great Rabbi Yosef Kaira, who we know that a Maggid came from heaven, right? The famous Maggid Meisharim would come and speak with Rabbi Yosef Kaira, which was the soul of the Mishnayos. He says, and look at the Beis Yosef, he's the one that we all rely on. He's the master, and the Mishnah would reveal, the soul of the Mishnah revealed itself to him and said, you are the master of Mishnayos. And he was able to understand the Kabbalah of the Ramak. But he couldn't understand the Arizal. What, because he didn't have the mental capacity? He says, what about all the Arizal's Talmidim that understood? And the famous Saruk, right, Rabbi Shaul Saruk we spoke about. I knew him here in Venice. I knew that man and I heard him speak, and he taught it all to the Rameh Mipana, all of that Kabbalah. You're telling me that he understood it, but Rabbi Yosef Kaira couldn't hack it. How do you explain that? Doesn't make sense. Elam, are you going to say B? Maybe Rabbi Yosef Kaira was deficient in maybe his soul wasn't pure enough. Rubbish. You're saying he wasn't righteous enough? His neshama wasn't pure enough to learn the Arizal? So then whoever could? Who could ever be Roy? If Rabbi Yosef Kaira, who an angel came from heaven and taught him, and the angel said, God is glorified, God is proud of you. You are God's glory. And he also learned the Kabbalah from the Ramak, and yet his soul wasn't privy to the Kabbalah of the Arizal. If such a godly man couldn't do it, how could someone like me? This was one of his very interesting claims he had. Very interesting.
So he believed in the Ramaks?
That's right, exactly. No, he's saying that Yeah.
So you had a problem with the Arizal, but not the Rambam.
Not the Arizal as a person. Not the Arizal, but the idea, no, not even that, but to say that all of these, no, he had a problem that the Ramak said without knowing the spheres, you don't know God. He had a problem with that too. You know? He's just saying you could eat. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Kabbalah at the end of his life.
That's debatable. That's Reb Chaim Vital says the Rambam never learned. The Baal Shem Tov says he did learn. So some say the end of his life. That's for another discussion. Anyhow, so this was one of his big.
He's also proud of the fact that their amendment Pana was his. What is it called?
More than that, throughout his forum, he quotes people as mukubolim with kavod. So he wasn't just. He's not saying Kabbalah is a complete waste of time. He never said that. But he had issues with the authenticity by saying how important it is. And he says the word Kabbalah means a tradition. He doesn't believe that all of this goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's not discounting all the Kabbalists. Anyhow, but this work that he wrote got him in major trouble.
Did he say anything about the Zohar?
Why did he say, he believes for sure the Rashbi didn't write the Zohar. Yeah, he writes that clearly. But he wasn't the first one or the last one to do that, right?
He wasn't the anti-mystic.
Yeah, but for some reason he never delved into it.
Alchemy is mystic too.
I know.
No.
Right.
No.
Well,
No,
somewhat.
Sorry, no. Alchemy is.
Whoa! You should have been there 2 years ago. Hold on, but hold on.
Alchemy is a sleight of hands. It's about dishonesty it's as dishonest as you can be. You can take this bottle and you can think it's a horse.
Okay. Reb Chaim Vital writes that he spent years on alchemy.
That's different than saying that alchemy is true.
No, but you know what? To a Kabbalist, alchemy is the secrets of creation. And let me tell you something. Hold on.
The Kabbalists have a certain opinion about alchemy, but they did not practice alchemy.
Reb Chaim Vital practiced to try and make gold.
They did not practice alchemy the way it was written here. They did not make lead into silver. That wasn't the alchemy they were practicing.
If I may, Reb Chaim Vital writes, when he came to the Arizal told him, Reb Chaim, I see on your forehead the pasuk in Chumash, thinking calculations in silver, gold. He writes how the seven metals correspond to the seven stars, stopping at Saturn, and they represent the seven midas. And hold on, let's questions later. So why did Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh write this work? Why did he write this work? Very, very crucial. Number one, he says himself, to defend the Rambam. In Italy, people were stamping on the Rambam. Kabbalah, the Renaissance created interest in the mystical, in alchemy and Kabbalah, and everyone who was getting a hand in Kabbalah said, the Rambam didn't know this, the Rambam didn't know that. He writes, to defend the Rambam, I came out with my guns blazing. But there was something else. There was a movement in those times called the Christian Kabbalists. It began with a fellow by the name of Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. You could check him up. He was a famous character in Italy in the end of the 1400s, and he dies young at the age of 31, but he was heavily steeped in studying alchemy, magic, everything to get his hands on. He was Christian. He was in Padua University there, and he meets a professor there by the name of Rabbi del Medigo, who was a rabbi and a professor. There was a painting of him in the Padua University for centuries. Rabbi del Medigo, right. He was the first one to write a sefer against Kabbalah called Bechinas Hadas, against Kabbalah. Anyhow, he's in the university there, and this Giovanni fellow wants to learn the secrets of Kabbalah. So he asks him. It's ironic because this Rabbi Leo discounts Kabbalah. Nonetheless, he taught to this Giovanni Hebrew. It seems he taught him Aramaic, and he translated some Kabbalah manuscripts into Latin. He translated some Kabbalah manuscripts into Latin. So it's ironic, the guy that didn't believe in Kabbalah ends up having a hand in the creation of this Christian Kabbalist phenomenon. This Giovanni then learned under another fellow, Rabbi Yochanan Almino, who was one of a very great Italian Kabbalists, a very secretive, elusive fellow. And this Giovanni learned much Kabbalah, actual Kabbalah, from this Rabbi Yochanan Almino. And this Giovanni, even in the Christian records, he's known as the father of Christian Kabbalists. Throughout the 1500s, this movement gained popularity. The Christians felt that the Kabbalah fits their dogmas. The idea that Abish has different spheres, different parts to him, fits perfectly into the Trinity, that God has different parts. And it became very scary. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena felt that the average Jew in Italy who wasn't versed in Kabbalah was being told by his Gentile neighbor that you should start learning Kabbalah. If you learn the Kabbalah, you will see the truth of Christianity. Like there are many Christians who say that today.
The Kabbalah Center.
And the problem is that the average Jew didn't know what to say because they weren't studying Kabbalah. So he felt he had to write a sefer to discount everything the Christians said. You're bringing proofs from Kabbalah to Christianity? Who Kabbalah? What Kabbalah? It's not authoritative. So that was another reason why he did it. The fact is today, I've seen many Fruma people, when they write about him, they accuse him of what he wrote against Kabbalah, of gambling, of not wearing a yarmulka in the street. There is a portrait of him without a yarmulka, but with a full beard, which is interesting, because the Chassam Sofer said that all the rabbis had no beard. He, Dafka, has a beard, which means he went above and beyond. But he doesn't have a yarmulka. So, well, no, we said but probably he did. We saw there was a debate about it, but he probably did.
Maybe he had the Kazayas.
No, on the painting it's a full beard, but a revealed head. So who knows? It could be for the painting they took. I don't know. They took a painting of him while he had a haircut. For the painting, he didn't have a yarmulke. But they, and there's another thing which this is horrible. One of the Sforim that he wrote is called Shagis Aryeh, the roar of a lion. What he does there is he defends the Torah Shebal Peh. He defends the fact that you need the interpretation of the Chachamim. Who's he defending it to? Who is he knocking off? There was a sefer written by somebody attacking Rabbinic Judaism, and he wrote the Shagis Aryeh to defend Rabbinic Judaism. He labels the work that he's fighting against the Kol Shachal, the voice of the cub, and here's the roar of the lion. Shachal is a lion, a young lion, but if you change the shin to a samach and the ches to a chof, you get sachal, which means a fool. So he calls it Kol Sachal, the voice of the fool, and I'm the roar of the lion. Now you wonder, how could he get in trouble for that? Well, a number of years ago, there were some historians that decided that he actually wrote the Kol Sachal. He wrote the treatise attacking Rabbinic Judaism, and later in life, he made a 180, so he wrote the defense. But he also wrote the accusation. Right. Now, why did some historians come to that conclusion? Because he doesn't, there is no author of the Kol Sachal. He found these manuscripts miraculously. No one else heard of these manuscripts. There's no name to it, and therefore he probably wrote it. Right.
Also play on the word lion.
Right. Right. And they felt that he wrote that when he believed at some point in his life, and later he did tshuva, and he writes in his works, in one of his forums, he writes that I wrote a sefer Shagis Aryeh defending Rabbinic Judaism against these manuscripts. He clearly testifies to the fact that he is the defender, not the attacker. Not just that. If you look through all of his works, he's quoting Gemaras in every single work of his. It doesn't even make sense that at any point of his life he had issues with the oral Torah. It's ludicrous. Whether you read his autobiography or his tshuvas that he wrote, He wrote a sefer on Agadah called the Boina. It's printed in many Ein Yaakovs called the Boina. He wrote so many Sfarim, and even in his attack on Kabbalah, he's quoting all from the Rabbanim, and it doesn't even make sense that at some point in his life, and it's rubbish, especially that he says he didn't write it. So
could be devil's advocate, maybe. No? He was good in playing two characters.
No, but it wasn't written as a dialogue of two people. It was written. So I don't know. I think, but the fact is that those that want to throw arrows at him today will accuse him of that as well. The accusations and the hate that there is towards him goes so far that look in number 30. The Yehudah quotes him. The Yehudah quotes him in his Sefer Shem Agdolim, where the Yehudah only quotes the great rabbis that have lived over time. He's not quoting in every Tom and Harry. He's quoting the Gdolim, as he refers to it himself. Look at number 30. Says the Yehudah, I saw in the book Chai Yehudah, I saw in a manuscript to the Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh, that he speaks about his life, the good stuff and the harsh stuff. I wanted to write a particular thing, says the Yehudah. He mentions Shehu B'tchilu Lo Hoya Ma'amin Begilgul. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh, at some point in his life, did not believe in reincarnation. Now that's a fact. He wrote a whole sefer called Ben David against gilgulim. Okay, that's another strike. Another strike is he wrote a sefer. Now he writes why he wrote it. Somebody had lost a kid and had asked him to write a sefer. You would think pro gilgulim, right? No, against gilgulim. So he wrote a sefer against gilgulim. Now says the Yehudah, I saw in a manuscript though of his autobiography Chai Yehudah that something happened one time. His neighbor had a boy, and the boy was young. The boy became sick, and 6 months old. The neighbor knocks on his door and says, Rabbi, come help my child. So he went to her, and he saw the kid was ill. He said some kapitlach, and all of a sudden the kid opened his eyes, and the kid said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad.
At 6 months.
At 6 months old. And he said, seeing is believing. Look at number 31, second line. From that day on, he said he believed in gilgulim, because his eyes saw this. A 6 months old speaking like an adult, and everyone could hear B'kol Ram.
And at 2.5 he was doing
Exactly. Says the Yehudah, this is what he wrote. I saw it in the manuscript. In the Chaya Yehudah we have today, this is not there. Many have said that this story never happened. It's a fake story. I saw one particular. I saw the Yehudah was fooled. The Yehudah was fooled. I saw some people write the Yehudah was fooled, and when I saw that, I was alarmed. What raya do you have? You know what their raya is? Just because it doesn't make sense. And I was burning mad. And no. And then I saw what happened. These were people that they were so angry at Yehudah Aryeh of Modena because of the Yarmulka thing, because of the anti-kaballah thing, because of the gambling thing, because of this, because of that, because he was It can't be that anything good came out of him, and therefore this story can't be. They're willing to drag the Yehudah in the mud because of their hate.
This is how they're reacting to Trump. He was the Trump of his time.
Exactly. And everything. No, in his time he was a legend. It's only the last couple decades. No, that's the Pella. The Pella is while he was alive, he was so respected.
No, I'm asking you.
For 400 years, people had patience for him. It's the last 30, 50 years that the world has turned against him.
So we have a question here.
Okay, hold on.
He said no politics because he's in favor of Biden. Is that what you said? Don't be shy about it. It's okay.
There's an expression called boliklal kas, boliklal tos. You know, if you get angry, you make a mistake. You can make a mistake.
Yeah, because
these people are so angry that Yehudah Aryeh that they're going to knock off anything. I'm telling you, it can't be this story happened. No, he has to be an antagonist against Kabbalah and Gilgulim, and they're going to schlep the Yehudah in the mud. It's very alarming. It's very surprising. Especially that if you look on the next page in number 35, in number 35, on the next page, number 35, there is a sefer called Gilgulei Neshamas, written by the Rameh of Fanu, our favorite Rabbi Menachem Aryeh. Gilgulim. And in the back of the sefer, the first printer a couple hundred years ago added some tidbits he found elsewhere. He says in 35, I found written in the name of Rabbi Yehudah, Hanikra Rabbi Yehudah Leon of Modena. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh was nicknamed Leon, because the lion, Leon. Hold on.
Who did he say was his mile?
Rabbi Menachem Azari was the moyel of Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh. Now this is the printer who's printing Gilgulei Neshamas is quoting, I saw in the name of Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena, who received from his Rebbes that they have a tradition, that the soul of Rashi is a reincarnation of Rav. The Rambam is a gilgul of Shmuel. Rabbeinu Tam is a gilgul of Rabbi Yochanan. The three greatest Amoraim come back as the three greatest Rishonim. The Chen is galgul advarim, and things repeat itself. Just like we paskin like Rav in the do's and don'ts of Judaism, like forbidden foods, so too we follow Rashi. Just like we follow Shmuel by monetary matters, skip a line, so too we follow the Rambam by monetary matters. And just like when Rav and Shmuel disagree, we're going to lean it like Rabbi Yochanan, so too if Rashi and the Rambam are at odds, we go like Rabbeinu Tam. The person printing this 300 years ago plus is quoting from Yehudah Aryeh of Modena about Gilgulim. Doesn't that show that at some point in his life So I came across this a couple years ago, a number of years ago when I got the Sefer Gilgulei Neshamas. I looked in the eyes, I read this, and I said, wow, this is gold! Doesn't this prove, like the Yehudah said, that at the end he came around? However, I will tell you, after I dug a bit further, I saw it's not so simple. Join me on the page before, number 27. In number 27, the page before, I'm almost done. In number 27, you got to listen to this. There's a sefer called Shalshelis HaKaballah, written in Italy by a big historian, Rabbi Gedalia Yichya. Okay? And he was older than Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. He's a generation before him. And he wrote the Shalshelis HaKaballah. The Seder Adeiris is always quoting from Shalshelis HaKaballah. History, stories, very interesting things. Says the Shalshelis HaKaballah, number 27. The Kibalti I received from the students of Rab Leon of Muriel, who received from his Rebbes that they have a Kabbalah that Rav came back as Rashi, Shmuel came back as the Rambam, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbeinu Tam, etc. It's the exact same thing, but it's from a different Leon. The Shalshelis HaKaballah can't be quoting Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. He was older than him. He's quoting from Rab Leon of Muriel, whoever that was. Which means in number 35, there's an error there. It's not from Yehudah Aryeh, it's a different Rab Leon. So it's pretty clear. There's no way out of this one.
Is it his works himself, Yehudah?
No. The only thing he has is Ben David against gilgulim. Right. So this really poured cold water on the whole thing. But that it doesn't disprove the Chidah's story. It just means that the gold, when I thought I struck gold, I didn't struck gold at all. It actually seems to be an error.
Alchemy problem.
So I can't use this as a Aryeh anymore because you see from number 27, it's from a different Leon.
Gilgulim already mentioned the Zohar or only later?
There's many Gemaras that seem to indicate the idea of Gilgulim.
Even Gemara.
The Gemara says about certain people they were the same person.
Oh.
And that's all understood by many to mean Gilgulim. Micha, Nevat, Sheva, Ben Bichri. Okay, let's leave that for now. That's not found in Gemara.
No, but that's also not a gilgul necessarily.
The Radvaz hold it's a Gilgul. Right, it could be the same person. Pashto the same person, yeah.
How do you live that long?
No, the Sfarno, Noisin is Brisi Shalom. He had harmony in his body, so the body never deteriorates. Okay, hold on. No, you got to listen to this. The proof, though, that he was a legend in his own time was the following. One of the most famous Jewish heretics over the past 500 years, His name was Uriel de Costa.
Holland.
2 minutes to tell you who he was. Uriel de Costa was born in about 1585. Okay, it's a little younger than Yehudah Aryeh. He's born in Portugal to a family of Marranos. They were forced to convert into Christianity. The Inquisition apparently had an eye on the family. They ultimately left Portugal. He, a few brothers, and their mother. His father had died. And they went to...
Amsterdam.
He went to Hamburg. His brothers went to Amsterdam. They all had a bris milah and took on Jewish names. Originally he was called Gavriel, but he was given Gabriel, Gavriel. He wanted a Jewish name, not Gavriel, Uriel. Right? Christians don't give Uriel. Uriel is a Jewish name. And he had a bris milah. Already he was older, so it was a big thing. But it was the first time he ever saw a religious Jew. In Portugal, there were no religious Jews. And he sees rabbinic Judaism. It was not what he expected. He knew he was a baki in Tanakh. He knew Tanakh backwards and forwards. He said, "This is Yiddishkeit." Everything was so rabbinicized, whatever the word is. Everything was so rabbinically ordained.
The books.
Yeah, where's the philosophy? Where's the metaphysics? Yeah, where's the soul? Everything is so rigid. Rabbinic, just rigid. Do this, you can't do that. He wrote a book against rabbinic Judaism. He wrote a book against.
What year was this?
This is in the early 1600s.
Against Gemara?
Definitely against the rabbis of Bechlal, that the Chachamim at some point in time got lots of things wrong. This is not what God had in mind for Judaism. Okay?
That was one of the problems with Spinoza also.
Spinoza is makabel from him. He wrote this work. He wrote it in Hamburg. Hold on. Hamburg was confused because Hamburg was a tolerant community. What do they do with this guy? On the one hand, the guy just joined Yiddishkeit. He just had a bris havrachmanas. On the other hand, he just joined and is already writing works again. So what did they do? They wrote a letter to the Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. Asked him for help. He was the guy they reached out to from Hamburg.
Wow.
They reached out to Venice, to Yehudah Aryeh, which means he was the guy to reach out to. How come people aren't aware of that? People aren't aware of that. And he wrote a sefer called Mogen Vitzina, the shields and the armor, defending the oral Torah against Uriel de Costa. And he wrote back to the Hamburg Bezdin, you got to put him in Cherem until he turns over a new leaf.
Are you sure it was Hamburg, not Amsterdam?
Yes. Yeah. It happened, and he put him in Cherem, Hamburg put him in Cherem, then he went to Amsterdam.
Oh, then he went
Yeah, he goes to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, though, Amsterdam was even more tolerant than Hamburg. The problem is this guy was already in Cherem. They upheld the Cherem. Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh had a student who was in Amsterdam called Rabbi Shol Mortera, whatever. It was the Cherem's upheld. And Uriel de Costa later writes a second book. He wrote a second book where he denies the immortality of the neshama. The nitzchias of the fact that a soul lives forever, he denies it. And he wrote this. The problem is, this is against not only Judaism, it's against Christianity as well. Now he wrote his works in, I guess maybe Spanish.
I think Latin, no?
Maybe Latin. Okay, it was I don't know. It was one of the things. Okay, whatever he wrote. So the goyim read it. He denies the soul. Every religion is based on the immortality of the soul. The goyim burnt his book. I saw somewhere that the king of Denmark salvaged one copy. The only copy that survived was in Denmark, because they wanted to have a copy of it for the museum or something. But and he was ostracized both by the Yidden and the Goyim. Now he had no friends at all. I mean, he was just digging his own grave. At some point, he decided that he can't live like this. He needs a community. So he no. So in Amsterdam, he wanted to make peace. He said, "Okay," he said, "I'm a new person," and they reaccepted him into the community. Apparently, shortly after that, he soured again. he told there was some guy who wanted to convert, and he badmouthed Judaism. He said, Judaism today is not real Judaism. And apparently he was caught.
You never met the right Jewish girl.
He was caught, I don't know, doing some, eating treif publicly or something. So he went into his second cherem.
He never got married. He got married?
Don't know about that. He was muhrim a second time. I don't know if he did. I think he wanted to. He was muhrim a second time. And he lived 7 years in solitude in Amsterdam. No one wanted to talk to him. Until he writes that he was gone, went Meshuggah. He writes, he has autobiography. He says, you know what? I'll live like a monkey amongst monkeys, and I'll join the Jews again. He's coming back. He's coming back.
This is what he says?
He
said monkey?
Yeah. That's what's quoted. I mean, in 1640, which is in mid-50s by now, he says, I'm ready to come back. This time, they don't trust him. You want to come back, Malchus? They gave him 39 lashes.
Embarrassment.
39 lashes, but like the minhag was in Europe, they tied him either to a pole or on the floor, and everyone walked into shul and spat at him or stood on him. It didn't work out well. He went nuts. He was so furious, they took a gun. Apparently someone in his family had daubed on him to the Jewish courts that he wasn't following tradition. He took a gun to kill his family member. He shot. Something went wrong. Either he missed or something went wrong, but the second bullet, he shot himself. And he had a mortal wound, then he died shortly after from that. A lonely man, he died. That's not so posh because he got Malchus right before he died. The Gemara says Malchus cleanses you from your sins. It's a very sad story because he started off, he was brought up as a Christian. He left to embrace Yiddishkeit. He got a bris later in life. And unfortunately, but right before he died, he came out with a third thing, right? First he wrote against rabbinic Judaism. Then he came out against the immortality of the soul. The last thing he wrote about was he believes Tanakh was made up. He never denied the existence of God. He was a big believer in the Eibishter. But his last thing was he thinks that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't told by the Eibishter. That was his last. He went from stage to stage, It's a very sad story. He was apparently a relative of Baruch Spinoza. That's what they say, a relative. Baruch Spinoza was 8 years old when Aryeh da Costa passed away, but they lived in the same place. They say that Baruch read his works and was heavily influenced. Baruch took it a stage further. Baruch didn't believe in the same God that we believe in. It sounded like Aryeh da Costa believed in, God, the way Christian God, but he...
If you don't believe in the Torah, how do you believe in God?
Christian... any guy on the street.
Who is God if you don't believe in the Torah?
Torah, God, I'm the one, the only one that created the heaven and the earth. They believe in it.
It's considered believing in God? If you believe
yes.
If you don't believe in Har Sinai?
Yes, you still get the mitzvah of Anoich Hashem Elokecha. You still get the mitzvah of believing in the Eibishter.
If you don't believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim, so how?
Someone could say that Moshe, if someone, God forbid, says Moshe made everything up, he's considered a heretic, but he still gets credit for believing in God.
Maybe
Two different things.
Yetzias Mitzrayim, no?
No.
Okay.
No.
I should see.
Hold on. The last thing is like this. This is really where the storm begins. Well, I'm telling you that because you see that who was the rabbi that Hamburg turned to? Yehudah Aryeh. He was the guy they turned to. The story.
Yes.
No, the story is documented.
With the Costa.
Yeah, the story's documented.
The Costa with the three parts.
Yeah, that's documented. Oh, I'm not making things up. I'm not.
No, not you.
I'm not saying that God came to me.
In the 1600s.
No, we have the works. Yehudah Aryeh's work is in existence that he wrote against Aryeh da Costa. Aryeh da Costa's autobiography is in existence. The last thing is number 32. And there was a big rabbi in Eretz Yisrael called. He was known by his work, Tzitz Eliezer. Rabbi Waldenberg was his name, Waldenberg.
Passed away 10 years ago.
Yeah, a little more. Yeah, recently. He writes the following. It's a shocking letter. Read it with me, number 32. He says, I saw in the works of Ziknei Yehudah, from the Italian Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh, where he writes about singing song in the shul based on music, the art of music. Singing songs, tunes in the shul, that not necessarily composed by a Jew, beautiful classical music. And in the heter of a chazan repeating words during his chazanas. He says like this. First of all, that sefer is not talking about singing romantic songs. There was a movement to sing romantic love tunes in the shuls. So the Tzitz Eliezer says, first of all, Yehudah Aryeh wasn't talking about that. He also wasn't talking about using instruments in the shul. But he was talking about singing classical melodies, tunes. He says like this, Amnam, however, when Yehudah Aryeh of Modena praises song and music, he speaks beganusim. He belittles those that opposed it, who were greater than him, he says. And he says silly things. He says that the chazonim that don't daven with music, they're like donkeys. Why is that so? And there's no sweetness in their voice. And he says they cream out Hashem Elokeinu like a dog and like an oiriv. Yehudah Aryeh made fun of those that don't have music in their shuls, how dry it is. It's like a donkey, it's like a dog, it's like a raven. So, the Gami says, Bechlal, he says to bring music into the shul based on music. And the he says,
he's not talking about rock and roll, he's talking about chazonis. The Alter Rebbe wants chazonis. The Alter Rebbe said if only we would sing more.
Know what they want? No, they were talking about having Pashat,
but that's not what he said.
like opera. Opera style. No. He says, Yehudah Aryeh said, you want a chazan who could bellow his voice like 10 people singing at the same time. He says, this is a joke. This is not acceptable. And he says, like Yehudah Aryeh says, he says the people against it were...
Is recently.
And he says the fact that Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh wants to allow the chazan to repeat words Shmoneh Esrei while he davens, that's against what all the rabbis say, who spoke horribly against his tzaras. It's a tzaras for a chazan to repeat his words of Shmoneh Esrei. It destroys the kavanah and other issues I won't even tell you about. Look what he says in number 33. Said the Tzitz Eliezer, don't care what this Italian rabbi has to say. He says, it's no wonder that he wrote what he wrote, because this man was confused. He was changing every day. Every day he would change his opinions. He held a war against the rabbis, against the great people of his city, no less than the reform movement against their rabbis in Germany. He says Yehudah Aryeh led a movement against the rabbis. He says more than one person looked at him as a heretic.
And in his time?
Yeah, but I know.
Was he making this stuff up?
There's no one knows where he got this from. He says, in more than one person, he was muhsik as a kaifer.
Meir Shver against davening with the no make up stuff.
Something like that.
But he's right. He was
No, but during Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh's times, no one who came out against him. On the contrary, we don't.
The second that they backed him up, and he was on.
Yeah, but what do you mean?
The guy could tell you to go jump off a roof.
Yeah, but in his time, he was accepted. He says, look at that. He testifies about himself. He went on the street without a head covering. And not just that. In his letter about the head covering, you know what he says? You know what Rabbi Yehudah Aryeh writes? That the words of Chazal have to be understood according to the time and according to the place, according to the person. And he says, there's no end to the amount of things that were once prohibited and over time became permitted. Says Tzitz Eliezer, can a Jew say that this man is a rabbi? You call this guy a rabbi? Now I say, yeah, there are many things that came mutter over time. Liquids that were revealed you couldn't drink because maybe a snake put in poison. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't apply today.
Eliezer's against it.
Tosfos discusses instruments on Shabbos these days that people are not experts in fixing instruments. Maybe doesn't apply. There are many things, and playing soccer on Shabbos in Italy.
Yeah.
People love to play. He laughed at those that prohibited it. How could you call the guy a rabbi if he laughed at those that prohibited it? I don't know. Playing with balls on Shabbos, machlokes in Shulchan Aruch if it's muktzah or not. One opinion holds it's not muktzah. According to that opinion, it's fine to do. So he thought that those that prohibited it were just making new prohibitions. You know that years ago, there were almost 90 years ago, there were those rabbis that wanted to come out against sardines, the eating sardines, canned sardines. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Bochum that go on Merkez Shlichus travel around, the only food they have is sardines, and these people want to take it away from them.
It's Eliezer, he's lining up.
Not just that, he says his entire life until his elder years, he gambled. He was Mesachik Bekuvya, look at number 34. And he couldn't in any fashion wean himself up off of that, even though he lost tremendous amounts of money. And it destroyed his family. Look in the Sefer Chai Yehudah. He wrote Sfarim against Kabbalah, against the Zohar. He taught and he told people to become friends with the Christians, which he writes that it's the biggest Kiddush Hashem. And the Tzitzel said it's the biggest Aveira. He said you should learn Chochmah plus Greek philosophy as well. He belittled Minhagim while he spoke about the importance of keeping them. And then he brings what we saw, that on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, he went to the casino, lost all his money. And he said at the bottom, such a person that has all of these negative traits, do you care about what he writes in halacha? He writes he writes whatever goes up in his mind. He's just like Doeg HaAdoimi.
That's because
he says, it's just like Doeg that the Gemara says that his learning is all on the exterior. Therefore, I don't care what the guy writes in his tshuvas. The fact is the rabbis in Venice were against him, and they were sharply against him. Now he quotes Rabbi Aryeh Figo, the Gedulei Truma, who I know quotes from Yehudah Aryeh of Modena. So I don't know about what he's quoting here. He says the Gedulei Truma, that was Rabbi Aryeh Figo's big sefer, was a Rav in Venice, a little younger than Yehudah Aryeh. He says he sharply attacked Yehudah Aryeh. I don't know what that refers to. We do know that he quotes from Yehudah Aryeh's Torah.
What's a little bit of here and there?
you know the
And he says the only thing you could trust from what he writes is something which you know to be true.
Yeah.
But anything that you're relying on him, don't take a word the man says. So you want to know all of his crimes? He's against Kabbalah, and he belittles Minhagim. He couldn't stop gambling. The Yarmulka business. Many people in his time thought he was a kafir. I don't know what he's talking about.
Can you blame
He was the biggest darshan, but historically it seems that he was the greatest darshan in Venice. He writes that even in his older years, the shul was full. They were going there as well, but there were many Yidden who came to hear him.
Because he was such a good storyteller. Listen,
he was a great
it's
speaker.
A good story to say that you lost $300,000.
They didn't announce. Hold on.
It's over $1 million at least. How did he earn it to begin with? To lose it, you have to
alchemy.
have it.
Alchemy.
Oh, I forgot. They made gold. A Geltman.
Oh, we have
and no. So this is so. Those that Pashut throw to Yehudah Aryeh in the mud, they quote the Tzitz Eliezer. But the truth is, each of the things that he wrote, you can defend. Why he wrote against Kabbalah, A, is not the only person. B, we gave a few explanations why he did that. Exactly, and the Rambam, the Yarmulka, it's the halacha. He holds you don't need a Yarmulka.
It seems like he argues with him though. It's on the music thing. He's just saying the guy's a little short.
Don't quote a word he says. The gambling Nebuch, he writes. He had such a hard life.
The gambling. That's what couldn't pull himself away from it.
There was one source we didn't read where he says that because of all the tzaras of his life, he ended up gambling. Not that they brought the tzaras, it was because of the tzaras. Something started. Anyhow, all right.